It was 54 years ago this month that hundreds of protesters marched in Alabama in a key moment for the civil rights movement. African-American protesters marched in Selma, fighting for voting rights. On March 7, 1965, demonstrations on the Edmund Pettus Bridge led to violence. State troopers attacked unarmed protesters. The event became known as Bloody Sunday. Well, this weekend, 2020 presidential candidates, along with Hillary Clinton and thousands of others, are remembering Bloody Sunday, and they're celebrating the Civil Rights Act in Selma, Alabama. Earlier, I spoke with Hunter Walker. He's a White House reporter for Yahoo News. He is in Selma and was on the bridge as people were marching.
So right now, I am on the span of the Edmund Pettus Bridge, and the marchers just reached the bridge a few minutes ago. The crowd includes Reverend William Barber, Reverend Jesse Jackson, Hillary Clinton, Senator Cory Booker, Senator Sherrod Brown, and they're basically reenacting the route from the 1965 Bloody Sunday March. And that's when a bunch of voting rights activists took off from Brown AME Baptist Church in Selma. They were organized in part by Martin Luther King and also current Congressman John Lewis. And they attempted to cross this bridge on a march from Selma to the state capitol in Montgomery. And right when they hit the middle of this bridge, about where I'm standing now, they were met by a force that included sheriffs, police, and white protesters who, met them with brutal violence that left a lot of people, including Congressman Lewis, injured. So this is an annual reenactment, but for this year, which is the 54th, they're calling it a Jubilee, and it has basically become an extension of the presidential campaign with all the folks I named here. And then earlier this morning, you saw also Bernie Sanders was here in Selma. Julian Castro was supposed to come, but he canceled. So this has become a big campaign trail stop in this election.
I can see Cory Booker walking behind Hillary Clinton. Can't see Sherrod Brown, but Hunter, what did they want to go there for more than just, that sort of hallowed ground, especially on this anniversary day. But was this also something of a campaign stop for them?
Well, I think, as we've seen in recent elections, the minority vote is really crucial to the Democratic Party. So this is not only symbolic, but, this is really a place where, as Jesse Jackson described it to me earlier, the minority vote was born. He said this is the birthplace of the coalition that elected Barack Obama. And a couple of the people who are here today say they have personal connections to the protests. Senator Cory Booker often tells the story on the stump of this young lawyer who was inspired by the brutality he saw in Selma to become an activist. And that lawyer ended up helping his parents move to the suburbs and fight housing discrimination. And through that, he was able to sort of bring himself to Stanford, Yale, and eventually the Senate. Hillary Clinton had a dramatic speech at Brown Baptist where she talked about how, hers was the first election after the VRA, the Voting Rights Act established by Lyndon Johnson, was really gutted. And she really basically said her loss happened in part because that legislation that people fought for here 54 years ago no longer exists. So, I think there are optics here at play, but also folks say they have a much deeper connection to this movement and, the heroic actions that took place on this bridge years ago.
And we should add Sherrod Brown, who is there as a senator. He has not declared he's going to run for president. There's some speculation, but he has not declared.
Yeah, he was telling us earlier today that he expects to make a decision by the end of the month, and that, the main factor is it's sort of a personal decision. His wife is a journalist. Her life and career would be totally upended. So everyone else is official, and he's certainly leaning into it with his appearance here today and his comments about making a decision soon.
So, Hunter, I don't know if you've had a chance to sort of take the temperature of the folks in Alabama, but they've got that one Democratic senator, Senator Jones, and so that's a big deal in a state like that. Have you been talking to folks? What's it looking like as we start heading toward 2020 and hopefuls like Cory Booker show up?
Well, they're really concerned about erosion of the gains that they've made in recent years through this protest and otherwise. So, we saw a lot of voting rights activists, including Sherrilyn Ifill, who's, fighting this on the legal front, come here and make the case that, they need to be very active in, litigating and pursuing action when they see things such as gerrymandering, such as issues at the polls that they believe are designed to block their vote. So that really is one unifying message I heard from the folks here in Selma today. Also, Cory Booker was the keynote speaker at Brown Baptist. He's very much, of the Black church and from that community. And I think his speech really did resonate with the crowd there. There were a lot of folks who said they liked him. But, you know, as we often see with early primary states, I wasn't seeing anyone sort of overwhelmingly united behind any one candidate. They're more just excited about, you know, getting a chance to potentially oust Donald Trump, who in this area, which is known as the Black Belt of Alabama, this is really the base that elected that Democrat, Doug Jones, and Trump is extremely unpopular here.
You know what came after, historically, Hunter, you'll know that what came after Bloody Sunday, of course, was the Voting Rights Act of 1965. It erased the barriers that prevented African Americans from casting their ballots. Bernie Sanders spoke about the fight for voting rights, which continues today. Here's some of what he said.
The people who own America, the people who put hundreds of millions of dollars to elect candidates who represent the wealthy and the powerful, they know about the power of the vote. And it's our turn to demand that we end all voter suppression in this country.
So what's he going to do, Hunter?
Well, that's a very similar message that we heard from activists like Sherrilyn Ifill, Jesse Jackson, also Hillary Clinton and Cory Booker. They really want to take office, and they believe that in doing so, they do need to do things like that litigation I was talking about. But once in power, I think Democrats are all really talking about taking on gerrymandering and, you know, taking on voter ID laws and these things that they do believe are voter suppression. So Sanders really was in line with the message I've heard from other people here today.
But beyond kind of drumming up the crowd, did he give any specifics about what he wants to do related to that?
You know, I sort of half heard you there. I think you're asking about specifics. At this stage in the Democratic primary, I think we're seeing a lot of conceptual talk and a lot of big ideas that aren't necessarily super detailed on things like immigration, on things like voting rights. But, you know, I think there's no question that the party in power does have a lot of control, particularly if they take Congress and can do redistricting in 2020 over voting rights going forward, and particularly gerrymandering.
Hunter, you are a man who can walk and talk very well. Thank you for the reporting.
Thanks for having me.